and welcome to Undercurrent, Western Australia's current affairs program. I'm your host, Lucy Nichol. If you're at home watching this on television, then chances are you're not homeless. Maybe you've done it a bit tough, having to crash on a friend's couch at some stage in your life. Did you know that there are many families homeless in Perth, some of them with as many as 9 children sleeping rough on the streets? Journalist Laura Novo finds out what we can do to help combat the serious issue that is homelessness.
324 Wellington Street is one of the places where homeless people can find some help in Perth CBD. On any given night, over 200 people are sleeping rough on the streets of Perth. According to Homelessness Australia, there are 9,595 people in WA who are experiencing homelessness today. So the question now is how we can help more efficiently these people in the richest state of Australia.
Homelessness in general is horrifically high in Western Australia, increasingly so, and in Perth it is increasing every year. The other day I was with a homeless family, a mother 43 years of age with 4 daughters, all homeless, and they've been chronically homeless a couple of years on the streets, moving from parks, squats, alleyways and traps. They've now got a granddaughter. One of the 17-year-old had a bub on the streets, and she's 6 months old. She was born on the streets. She's lived her whole life on the streets. This is the real picture of this country, and something most Australians won't know. Of the 100,000 plus Australians who are registered as homeless, of the 100,000 plus Australians, 17,000 going on to 20,000. 20,000 are actually children under the age of 12 years of age, and nearly half, or over 40% of our homeless are actually under 18 years of age.
People can be from all walks of life, all socio-economic groupings. It can be things like mental illness, financial circumstances, poor health that can be the drivers of homelessness.
So we have about 60% that say they are affected by mental health issues. What's causing those issues, or what's behind all of that, is a bit more complex. But generally it's things like trauma, victims of violence, loss, grief. It's those sorts of issues.
Importantly, we know that Aboriginal people are overrepresented in the number of homeless people on Perth streets. We know that, for a small proportion of the state's population, they make up a very large proportion of people who are living on the streets.
1 in 4 of the homeless are actually Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. 1 in 4 and close to 1 in 3 of the homeless are actually people who were born overseas, who came here for refuge and asylum, many of them, and have found it nightmarish, and have found themselves sleeping rough, sleeping on the streets, going from park, traps and alleyways. And women constitute, and also the elderly, a significant proportion, despite the majority being the young.
Statistically, there are more women that are homeless than men, but they're, however, not the majority of the people that are living on the street. The majority of people living on the street are men, but there are many other definitions of homelessness. They can include people who are couch surfing, people who are staying in temporary accommodation with families and friends that's in overcrowded situations, for example. So we know, for example, that homeless women might be couch surfing with friends, they might be at domestic violence refuges, whereas for men, they may more often end up on the streets.
I've been arguing for homeless-friendly precincts that we should actually have in all the major hubs of our urban masses and regional towns, wherever homelessness is pronounced, 24/7 homeless-friendly precincts, which mean showers, laundries, small storage facilities, treatment centres, safe spaces, rest spaces, and where the capacity is for sleeping areas, to give them that sliver of human dignity.
What we find is just being able to have a roof over their head and 3 meals a day allows them to take a break, just to chill out, essentially. And that's very important, because they can then start to think about, okay, well, if I've got some shelter and I've got some food, what can I do now? What's life going to look like in 3 months' time or 6 months' time?
Look, the needs of people who are homeless are very diverse, but There are a wide range of difficulties confronting them. For example, many people, whilst they would be eligible for Centrelink benefits, for example, may be breached because they don't have a regular mailing address. So these make practical life on the streets very difficult, particularly in terms of maintaining an income. It's very difficult to take the next step into accessing health and community services and things like employment if you can't even access an unemployment benefit.
The bit that I find most frustrating is when people make progress and they are starting to rebuild their lives and they don't need the level of support that we provide, where do they go to next? Where is that affordable house at the end of the day? Unfortunately, private rentals are now so unaffordable, particularly if you're still on a Centrelink income. You know, you might be undertaking training or education, but you're still on government income support. Where do you find that next affordable, stable home? And that's our biggest frustration, because the lack of options often result in people either leaving us and going to somewhere that's not satisfactory, and if things start to unravel, they can unravel very quickly, and then we find ourselves back at square one.
Governments do not provide the adequate funding and that need be. We could reallocate, we could argue forever and a day of what they should be doing. They're not doing anywhere near enough. Their responses are always the same. Their excuses and rationales are always banal. Incremental change always gets outstripped by an unmet need.
It actually costs more for someone to remain homeless on the street than it is to fund and support them in housing, often by double or triple the dollars. The community that's not widely understood in the community, but every time a homeless person presents to accident emergency or police attend or end up in the criminal justice system, that costs our society money at the end of the day. The data is out now, the research has been done. The cost of homelessness is far outweighs the cost of supporting them, and yet it still doesn't convert to action. So yes, government could do more, but I'd also encourage the community to understand this issue and demand for more response to homelessness.
Look, I think what is most challenging is recognising the fact that every night that there are hundreds of people on Perth streets, and that, you know, whilst I might be sleeping safe at home in my bed, that there's a very big job to do to make sure we're supporting the vulnerable in the Western Australian community, to make sure they don't become homeless.
It's not 100,000 people that are just homeless despite it being registered with the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It's a couple of 100,000 who are effectively homeless. And let's also forget that 2.5 million people are below the poverty Henderson line in this country. It's governments that can only respond to that. And the money's there. This is a wealthy nation. Whether it'll ever spend that money, I doubt it very much. It'll take a push, a cultural shift to change the mindset and thinking of our parliamentarians.
Our service and many other services, both here in Western Australia and countrywide, would not be able to respond to every request for assistance around housing. And often the turnaway rate is often 50% or more. If 50% people were turned away from doctors or from hospitals, there would be an absolute outrage in the community. I think just to acknowledge that it is an issue, and it's an issue that we need to take action for. Even doing that, you know, says something to our community and says something to our politicians that we can't tolerate this situation of more than 50% of people not receiving assistance. So that's a simple thing that can be done. Another simple thing that can be done is you can talk to someone in the street. If you see someone who is homeless or struggling, be a friendly voice. Say hello to them, acknowledge them as people. That's often the things that they struggle most against, is thousands of people walk by and do not acknowledge them as people.
Laura Novo reporting for Undercurrent.
Turn off those lights. No, you can't put the air conditioner on. It costs way too much money. Juanita asked the people of Perth if they really know why they are paying so much for their electricity bills, especially when so many Western Australians already invested so much in solar panels.
1 out of 5 Australian households uses solar energy. Australians who installed solar power has realised an increase in the number of their electrical bills. People who uses electricity at peak times will be charged more. What do you feel about this?
It should just be the same price throughout the day. There's no reason, if you're getting the same product, why you should be paying more for something regardless of when you're using it.
Pretty ridiculous considering everyone just goes home to watch TV and stuff and turn on the lights. Like, nobody's using power while they're at home, like working 8 till 5, so nobody's going to be using the power then anyway. So it's a little bit ridiculous, the fact that they're raising the bills after 6, in my opinion.
I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that the government was trying to charge higher electricity during peak hours. So that doesn't sound all that great.
It seems like an odd counterbalance system, I guess, but I don't know, because normally the way I think of solar panels is, well, what I know of solar panels anyway, is that you install them, they're normally a loss originally when you install them, and then they slowly pay for themselves, but increasing the price, I don't know about that.
This would mean that people who has installed solar power at their homes would have to pay more electricity. Do you think that it is a fair move by the government?
No, not at all. I think, like, in terms of using solar power, as long as you're trying to do the right thing, and like I said before, peak hour, what are they, like, taxing it more or something for using peak hour? Like I said before, that's pretty ridiculous.
Well, I think it's fair to the extent that they have to pay for the network. If they were off the grid completely and using battery power, then they shouldn't pay anything.
Why are you paying extra just because you're getting a product at a certain time? I don't see why the government keeps gouging people, on power and other essential items.
Do you think that this would discourage people from installing solar panels in the future?
Yeah, because you're meant to use it later in the night, because if you're not there in the day, and that's when the sun's out, so it would, I reckon.
Yeah, I reckon it would because of the cost and everything.
If they have to pay higher bills, I'll be discouraged from installing solar power. But if the cost of solar panels and battery storage comes down, then they'll probably still proceed to do it. And if they can work to getting off the grid completely, a lot of people will take up that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's if it's going to be a loss to install and then a further loss to run the solar panels, there's straight up no point.
3 years ago, the government was encouraging people to install solar panel. Do you think that it is fair now for solar panel people to pay more for grid maintenance, even if they don't consume as much energy?
Nah, it's not fair, yeah. They should be not charged extra for something that they've already been charged for in the first place.
There's no point in maintaining what isn't effective or isn't useful, because, if you want to do it on the ecological side, yes, it's good. It's always going to be good. But overall, at a cost-effective way, unless you're rich, people can't do this. And normally people install solar panels to eventually be able to pay it back and maintain power-wise.
They're the ones pushing for a healthy environment, all of that stuff. So, and the fact that they're not going out of their way to use the electricity that one would be using without the solar panels, it's not really fair that they have to pay the same amount for the grid maintenance.
I don't think it's fair. They should just do it, because it's they're saving electricity by having the solar panels, that it should just be not that expensive.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair either, because they're already doing their part, so they shouldn't have to pay more.
I hope those answers didn't make you too hot and bothered. Now it's time for a short break to hear from our sponsors. We'll be back shortly with more Undercurrent. Speed cameras, seat belts and restrictions on mobile phone use are all tactics used to reduce deaths on WA roads. Next up, journalist Laura Novo finds out if these tactics put in place by the Road Safety Commission are really reducing the number of deaths on our roads.
The Road Safety Commission wants to make the streets of Western Australia safer for all of us. They are reviewing now their strategy towards zero, because no life should be lost on our roads. What were the original goals, and have they changed over all these years till today?
So the state's road safety strategy is about a systems approach. The number one risk for us on the roads is speed. The outcomes will be less severe if people are travelling at safer speeds. So that forms part of a significant component of our plan, is to reduce the speed on the road and make sure people are travelling safely and they arrive at their destination.
And what have been the measures which have been proved more effective?
So we're investing very heavily in audible edge lines, and we have introduced wire barriers on the freeways to try and reduce the likelihood of runoff.
Toll Zero started in 2008 and now you are doing a review. Why now?
An intelligence fusion centre is a concept where we bring together different data sets from across government. We have analysts in the room looking from different perspectives. So we'll have analysts from main roads, we'll have analysts from road safety, we'll have analysts from police and from health who will sit in the room and look at the data available to us as a full landscape, so we can have a different perspective from each of those people. They can entertain conversation about understanding what the environment is, and then, through that process, you often generate new initiatives, new outcomes.
What are the most common issues with drivers and riders on the roads?
The number one challenge in this state, and will continue to be, is speed. In-car vehicle distraction is a significant and emerging issue for us. The prevalence of mobile phones, when you're in the car, that's a critical risk. If you've got your phone in your hand in the car, you are likely to be caught by the TEG bikes.
What do you think that are the biggest dangers in our roads?
On our roads, mobile phones being used in cars, young female P-platers seem to drive too fast.
And do you think that drivers here in Western Australia are sensible drivers?
I think we actually have very responsible, mature drivers. I think Western Australians, on the whole, are responsible. Because ultimately, every individual is responsible for their safety and the safety of every other person when they're driving a car.
Do you think that drivers in Perth are sensible drivers?
Yes, generally. Yeah, generally they are. I've driven in other states and there doesn't seem to be any real difference between people are people. Yeah. I've seen idiots here, I've seen idiots in other states.
Our strategy looks at all road users. That includes vulnerable road users, or those that we would define as more vulnerable. Now, to define that, you look at pedestrians, you look at cyclists and motorbike riders, because they're exposed on the road network. We have to share the space. We only have so much space on our roads, and those at greater risk need greater safety, and we have to be responsible for everyone on the road. So when it comes to cyclists, we have to understand that it's shared space, so it's a shared responsibility. It's the cyclists and the drivers who share the responsibility for each other's safety.
Laura Noble reporting for Undercurrent.
Malcolm Turnbull recently travelled to Paris and ratified the second commitment period of the Kyoto Principle. Australia was one of only a handful of developed nations that did so. Jack Middleton has the full story.
Hello, I'm Jack Middleton. So, the heads of 198 countries are meeting in France for the COP20 Council to decide the fate of the world. It's like the Council of Elrond, only it's somehow taking a lot longer. We're getting a lot less done, and our fellowship consists of the G20 members, which are sort of causing the majority of the problems we're trying to fix.
The mission of world leaders and policymakers at this UN climate change conference is to reach an agreement that would eventually stop the trend of record hot year after record hot year.
Hombres y mujeres son expulsados de sus casas.
Of the 15 warmest years on record have occurred since the year 2000. And 2015 is on pace to be the warmest year of all.
Will be the warmest year on record since we have records.
It's undisputable that a rise of 2 degrees or more around the world will cause droughts, there'll be rising sea levels, we'll lose all the coast. Developing countries will be hit the hardest, which aren't the countries causing this problem. Carbon dioxide levels have not been above this line for more than 650,000 years. That's longer than humans have been in this current evolutionary form. Some of the world's largest contributors are the United States, China, Japan, the Russian Federation, and the European Union. In a new report by Oxfam, it found that the world's richest 10% produce more than half of the world's emissions, while the poorest and vulnerable, the ones that are going to face the catastrophic storms and droughts and other severe weather conditions, contribute the least. The poorest half of the world's population, 3.5 billion people, are producing just 10% of global emissions. So with all these negotiations in Paris, it's the major developed countries that are causing the problem. It only takes a bit of analysis to find that the myths that citizens of developing countries are to blame for burning fossil fuel. The reason why we keep going back and forth year after year is because a select few would benefit from a weak deal, and that's the billionaires who have fortunes in fossil fuel. A person in the richest 1% of the world's population uses 175 times more carbon on average than someone from the bottom 10%. The total emissions of the poorest half of the population of China, which is about 600 million people, are only 1% of the total emissions of the richest 10% in the US, some 30 million people. So there's a big difference in who's using energy, how much money they have. There's definitely a correlation with that. And Australia is making one of the weakest commitments in Paris.
The rejection of the fossil fuel pledge came after politicians from Australia's National Party, who tend to represent rural areas, reportedly lobbied against it.
Turnbull has promised $1 billion to support climate change adaptations, but this is no real increase, and it's not going to make much of a difference. 86% of Australia's power comes from fossil fuels. I was thinking though, do you know what we have a lot of here in Australia? The sun. Yes, so naturally, Synergy is making people pay more for solar power. Linda Rose, Synergy's chairman, says that solar panel owners are getting a subsidy. Well, yes, after the $6,500 it takes to get a basic system installed that won't even cover your daily needs, maybe. But he says it won't reflect the annual charges of being connected to the network. But he does claim it's not an argument against solar technology. No, you're right, it's just a dumb and money-driven argument against logic that completely has a disregard for your planet that you live on. So anyone can make a difference in climate change. Anyone can fight for the planet, even Ben and Jerry's.
This is what happens when ice cream is just 2 degrees warmer than it should be. For Ben and Jerry's, it's a mess.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. If something's going to instigate a change globally.
We shape what will be in the history books. This will be in the history books. It is what we make out of it.
Or if you read this article, global warming is solved. We've solved it because we've isolated the protein which prevents ice cream from melting. So we can have our unmelted ice cream, and well, all the cows may be dead because the grass is dead, or the almonds or soy, whatever you like. But it's okay because we've managed to make scientific developments in preventing ice cream from melting, but we can't save our entire planet.
À Paris en 2015, les gouvernants du monde entier
vont se réunir
ومؤسسين التنظيم
والعمل معا untuk menjadikan Paris 2015
в борьбе с глобальным климатическим изменением.
Seriously, if Greenland, the country, melts like our ice cream, which will happen if the world gets too hot, the seas will rise 23 feet. That's Venice gone, New York gone. Let's hope that the heads of these major, powerful, rich and energy-guzzling nations will do the right thing for the rest of the people of the world and all the living creatures on the planet that we are slowly killing. I'm Jack Middleton. Stay cool.
This week, Laura Novo attended the Central Institute of Technology Student Awards to learn from the next generation of video game, 3D and 2D animation designers.
Tonight, the Central Institute of Technology awards its most talented students, the ones who have worked the hardest, presenting an outstanding work.
The work here is from students, second and third year students, Advanced Diploma of Animation and Advanced Diploma of Games on the other side. So it's an accumulation of probably 12 to 18 months of hard work for all these showreels, and the students specialise in various 3D software packages, compositing things, packages, Adobe, After Effects, Photoshop, these sorts of typical programs, as well as specialist programs, 3D animation and compositing.
That's actually 2 years effort that I put on my work, and I really enjoyed what I've done.
It's some of my best work. I've spent a lot of time working on it all, and yeah, I just like to create things and
My work here is, what's showing right now is a Blunder Down Under, which is a Australian survival game. It's set in the Australian outback, and we have kangaroos fighting the player. We also have an outhouse, which is with secret robotic legs that pop out of the ground, as you can see here. In the other footage, there's my corporate combat game, which is a 2D fighting game set in an office space.
So this is like basically 3D animation, motion graphic, and visualizations. There's a little bit of these three things. It is starting from the visualization, which is the 3 Coins restaurant, is a restaurant in Perth. And yeah, basically after that, you can say a bit of animation, a bit of 3D motion graphic.
These two are my dream. It was supposed to be a dream house, but I ended up with a room. So it's my dreams room. And those two on the top, they are the city. Mm-hmm. The city that I've made in 3D Max, and just a flat picture at the end. But I really enjoyed learning them, and I had lots of fun with it.
What has been the most challenging part of your work?
The 3D side of things, that was like the hardest for me, because I always kind of like used to just like drawing down ideas and just kind of like getting that from scratch, whereas 3D, you kind of have to rethink how you're going to approach the whole idea, because it's more from a technical basis, and I'm used to kind of like starting from a creative like background. So yeah, I think just getting used to the technical side of things, and but still trying to make it like creative, and just still trying to put an aesthetic and story and stuff to it. Yeah.
Probably the 3D, getting all the settings right, making sure it looks nice, realistic, lighting it up, and especially the part that no one likes, the rendering, waiting for all the frames to come out. So
definitely learning it. At the start, it was pretty hard to learn. I couldn't get my head around the rest of it. After a while, it's become like second nature now. It's pretty fun.
And what are you most proud of, what you are showing us?
Probably one of the animal rigs, definitely. They've got a lot of like work put into them, and I'm pretty proud of those, yeah.
Some of it's exceptional. You know, technically it's amazing, and the style that they do things in, it's brilliant. Yeah, it's they've, you know, having had them for the last couple of years, it's been quite a journey, and this is my favourite night of the year to see it all come together like this. It's really quite a gratifying thing.
So as a lecturer here in TAFE, what is your aim?
My aim is to, impart skills on people that they'll have for the rest of their lives, and they'll be able to enjoy utilising for the rest of their lives. Learning stuff in Photoshop and Flash, and learning to animate is something that you get a passion for, and it's a great thing to be able to do, whether you're getting paid for it or not. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, but whether I'm getting paid for it or not, I still do it, and it's a great source of joy for me to be able to sit down and do that sort of thing, and hopefully that's what the students get as well.
Laura Noble reporting from Central Institute of Technology for Undercurrent.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's program. I'm Lucy Nicol, and I will see you next week, same time, same place, on Western Australia's current affairs program, Undercurrent.